Welcome to Pursuit of Purpose, where we are healed, delivered, and by God's power, helping others break free. I am your host, author, speaker, and kingdom writing coach, Indiana Tuggle. Today on Pursuit of Purpose, we are reading from my fourth book, which is entitled Finding Faith. And if you've watched the previous episodes, you will know that Finding Faith came about when I was going through a lot of unrest in my life. I had went through a season where I seemed to have lost several things. I lost my job, I lost my home, and then I lost my mother. So with the current state of unrest that we are in as a city, as a nation, as a people, I felt it befitting to come on and talk about when you're dealing with loss. In particular today, I'm talking from the 8th chapter of that book, and I entitled it When Morning Comes, and I entitled it that because one of the things that I really had to learn in dealing with grief and dealing with the death of my mother is that mourning comes in waves, and it comes in many different stages. And I felt like my situation was a little bit different because when you think of someone losing their mother, you think of all of the great times and you think about what it would feel like to lose a mom. And for me, it was especially hard because my mother and I didn't have a pleasant relationship. And when I say pleasant, I say that term a little bit loosely, and I don't say it as to mean that she was abusive or anything like that, at least not physically. But I say that because we had a strain on our relationship due to me being upset about a lot of the things that transpired in my life, with the molestations, with the growing up in a domestic violence household, having to witness, her and my father's domestic violence and the drug use and things like that, having to witness that. And so there was a lot of struggle, a lot of fighting and arguing and name calling between us, to the point to where by the time I finally got out of the home at 19, I was like, I'm done. I don't have to deal with this lady no more. I don't have to deal with this attitude. I don't have to deal with the name calling. I don't have to deal with anything. So I had to deal with that. So when her death happened, I went through a flood of emotions, and so writing this chapter, it was very difficult for me because I grew up and I was taught, by my grandmother, by my mother, even by my church family, that you don't speak ill of the dead. Well, as a writing coach, I often teach my clients that in order for you to get past any type of trauma, you have to be able to release your feelings, no matter how they come. You have to be able to speak your truth. So I struggled with speaking my truth in this chapter. And in fact, when I got to this chapter and I began talking about my mother in chapter 7, by the time I made it to chapter 7, I put this book to the side. I was like, God, I don't want to deal with it, because I was still fighting with that, wanting to honor my mother in her death and not speak ill of her, but at the same time wanting to release all of the pent-up feelings and all of the pent-up energy that I was going through through my grieving process as well. So when I got to the chapter 7 and I began to discuss her death and grief, I put this book down. I put it to the side. And in doing so, I ended up slipping into a state of depression. And in that state of depression, God had impressed upon me to continue to write, but I didn't want to write this book. So I ended up started writing devotionals, and I didn't know it was devotionals at the time, but it was God having to literally pick me up out of that state of depression and remind me of who I was in Him. So I began writing. But in my head, I wasn't writing a book. I was just writing, communicating with God. So out of that, I was writing Awake in the Dream and didn't even know I was writing Awake in the Dream because I was running from finishing Finding Faith and tackling those tough issues that was coming up with me. So when we pick up in chapter 8, and hopefully we'll get through all of it today, but when we pick up in chapter 8, it is when I am really begin to write out my emotions and my feelings and what was really going on with me. So I'm going to start there. Chapter 8, When Morning Comes. Faith knows that loss is necessary to move from one season to the next, from glory to glory. Mama was mean. There really is no better way to say it. I remember telling myself at 19 as I was moving out, I'm glad to finally be out and I'm never coming back. She was always tough on me. I couldn't date or hang out with my friends. When everyone was at the mall hanging out or going to the movies, I had to stay home. I spent many nights alone in my room, crying myself to sleep, reading a book, studying, or eating and watching television. At 14, I had my first boyfriend, behind my mother's back, of course. I remember one night she came home. I couldn't have been no more than 15 or 16 and caught us lying naked in my bed asleep. I should have known better. My mother usually stayed out late, but no matter what time she came home, whether midnight or 3 a.m., she would always peek in my room and make sure I was okay. This night was no different. She peeked in my room, and I guess she did a double take because she peeked in, closed the door, then kicked it in about 5 seconds later. She started yelling and cursing, told him to get up and get out. Then she turned to me and said, "Get up and go take a bath, you little whore." I never saw her the same again from that day forward. He and I continued to date throughout high school. I took a many beatings and tongue lashings for getting caught cutting school with him. I didn't care. She never understood me, and I felt like he was the only one who loved me. Our relationship was tough. My adult years were spent trying to prove how grown up I was. I had my own place. I no longer had to listen to her cursing me out or calling me names. I made my own rules, and rule number 1, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't call me. I was always a sensitive child, up until I discovered boys, of course. I didn't get many spankings. All she had to do was yell at me and I would go to bed crying. But her words stuck with me always. I remember feeling that life was unfair and that I had to take care of her when the drugs, alcohol, and poor eating took its toll and led to diabetes, high blood pressure, and eventually diabetes and heart failure. I remember asking God why I had to take care of someone who never took care of me. But grudgingly, I did it. With no car, I had to take her to the grocery store to pay bills, to doctor's appointments, and even to see her mother and siblings when she wanted to. I certainly wasn't happy about it, and neither was she. We couldn't be in each other's presence 10 minutes without arguing. Around 2006, I rededicated my life to Christ and got back in church. Though I was changing, my mother reminded me how I couldn't possibly be a Christian and treat her the way that I did. One day, I finally admitted to God she was right. How could I call myself a Christian, knowing the word says, honor thy mother and thy father, and yet have so much anger and resentment against my own mother? I was angry, but my mother was ill, and it would have been selfish of me to express my anger at such an inopportune time. But I didn't know what to do with the anger. I was mad that all the ugly words she said to me over the years still rung in my ears like it was yesterday. I was mad that she didn't recognize the effects the molestations had on me. I was mad that the drugs and alcohol caused her to be present but absent. I was mad that I never knew my real father. I was mad that my life was not going the way I had planned. Yes, she was mean, but I was mad that though I tried hard not to, I was becoming just like her. Rather than continue to dwell in my anger, I began to pray for her salvation and ask God to help me with my feelings and show me how to forgive. It wasn't easy. Though I made many mistakes along the way, I learned to shut up. I stopped fighting her, but I was still wounded and spent many nights crying. I was even mad at God because He wouldn't let me defend myself. I know y'all been there. One day, while on a mission trip with my church in 2008, I clearly heard God say He was going to save her and then He was going to take her. But He needed me to show her Him. As I stated earlier, it wasn't until May of 2015 that I heard God speak those words again. My brother was returning home from prison and we went to meet him at the bus station. As she limped over to greet and hug him, smile as wide as the Pacific Ocean, I heard the Lord say, "Not too much longer." At first I didn't think anything of it. But a week later, as I spoke with my brother on the phone, I told him what I heard God say. The next few months were very hard on her. She was in and out of the hospital, broke her ankle in 6 places, couldn't walk, and could barely take care of herself. But she was one tough cookie. She wanted to stay in her home, and I came over 2 or 3 times a week to cook food and make sure she took her medicine. Each time before I left, I would pray, and God would always tell me to tell her, "Hold on, not too much longer." I replayed the days leading to her death over and over in my mind 1,000 times. Why wasn't I there with her when she went to the hospital? Why didn't I answer the phone when she called begging me to come check on her because she wasn't feeling well? Why didn't I go see her in the hospital the day before? She went to dialysis 3 days a week on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Tuesday night when she came home from dialysis, she wasn't feeling well and called me to come over. I went over and fixed dinner, helped her take a bath, and kissed her good night. Again, that night I prayed and said, "Mama, God said, hold on just a little while longer." But this time she responded, "I hope so, because I'm tired." Thursday night she got back from dialysis and wasn't feeling well again. She called me, but I was tired and didn't feel like being bothered. I didn't answer. The next morning she called me from the hospital and told me she was admitted the night before because her chest was hurting and she was throwing up. But she was feeling better now. I informed her that I was taking my brother to handle some business and would be by to see her. "Don't bother," she said. "Just take care of your brother and y'all can come see me in the morning. I'm fine." That night I went to my 20-year high school reunion. The next morning, I called her around about 10 a.m. to let her know I was on the way. No answer. I called my grandmother to see if she had heard anything. She informed me that she had spoken with her a few minutes earlier and that they were taking her down for tests and then off to dialysis. Cool, I thought. I can go a little later when she finishes dialysis. Dialysis normally takes about 4 hours, so I decided to go to our alumni picnic, but would leave early and spend the evening with my mother. At about 4 p.m., as I stood in line at the picnic for fried fish, a childhood acquaintance tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, ain't you Dale's daughter?" "Yeah," I said. "Somebody just posted on Facebook that she died." And my heart dropped. She always told me I would miss her when she was gone. I never knew how true that statement was until I saw the glow on her face when I walked into that hospital room. At that moment, I finally saw what God saw: a woman at peace, a woman who had been beaten and bruised, a woman victimized by false love, a woman finally embraced by the one who loved her most. Still unable to cry, I covered her feet with a blanket because she was always cold, and leaned down to kiss her cheeks and whispered softly in her ear, "Rest in peace, sister girl." That night, I battled with God for not allowing me to say goodbye, for not enabling me to release my anger sooner, for not allowing her to hear me say I loved her one last time. I yelled, I screamed, tossed, turned, and then finally closed my eyes. I sunk into my bed, frozen with peace. This moment felt familiar. I remember this touch. I felt it 25 plus years ago. I was about 13 or so. I don't remember what happened that day that left me so distraught, but I remember the knife in my hand going back and forth over my wrist. I remember the tears burning my cheeks. I remember rocking and crying, uttering, "Nobody loves me, nobody cares." By the time those words slid out of my mouth the third time, I heard him say, "I love you." I knew it was him because it wasn't the first time I'd heard him. I recalled that voice from when I was 8 years old, the year I was molested and was bullied every day at school. My teacher saw such anguish in my eyes and witnessed the change in behavior that she gave me a diary. That night, sitting up in my bed, rocking and tears flowing, I began to write, "Nobody loves me, nobody cares. Why do they hate me?" That night was the first time I heard him say, "I love you." At 8, I turned over, cuddled my diary, and cried myself to sleep. At 13, I put the knife down, cuddled my pillow, and cried myself to sleep. Now, at 38, I took a deep breath, cuddled my pillow, and cried myself to sleep. Again, God came to my rescue. Again, He heard my cry. Again, He embraced me with His love and gave me peace. I remember lying there, resting in His arms, in His presence, and telling God, "But I have no good memories. I can't remember the good times." At that moment, the phone rang. It was my brother. He and I began talking about our childhood and the years we spent in Texas, and the memories came back like a flood. I remembered our first days of school, the first snow day in Texas in years, and us sliding down the street on cardboard. I remember our first Christmas when I got the Cabbage Patch doll and roller skates I wanted. Love that doll. I remember the year my father left and went back to Memphis. My mother wanted us to have a good Christmas, but she couldn't afford the dollhouse I wanted, but she got me all the furniture instead. My brother and I went to the school and got 6 milk crates. I stacked them crates in the corner of my room 2 by 2 and decorated them with my new furniture. I remember how every Saturday she would get up and cook buffet-style breakfast, and afterwards we would sit at the table and play Monopoly. That's probably why breakfast is my favorite meal. It all came back at that moment. We stayed on the phone until the sun came up. I remember finally crying myself to sleep, but this time it was tears of joy. In that moment, in a matter of hours, God took away 25 years of anger and blame. That night changed my whole perspective of my childhood and my mother. I no longer saw a mean woman taking her anger and shortcomings out on me. I saw a mother beaten down at the hands of men who said they loved her, entrapped by drugs and alcohol, trying to make sure her kids had a better life than she had. I saw a woman who didn't know how to be a mother, but did the best she could. I saw a woman God chose as a vessel to bring me into the world. There was something she had that I needed. I needed her strength. Her ability to endure great pain was passed down to me and enabled me to endure the blows that life had for me. Perhaps some would say she chose the wrong path, which led to the drugs and the alcohol, but she also chose to stay. She stayed. She could have aborted us, she could have abandoned us, and she could have left us with my aunts or grandmother to raise, but she stayed, took responsibility, and most importantly, she introduced us to God. Though I never saw her go to church growing up, though I never saw her going to church growing up, she made sure I went. She made sure we went. When the church band came into the neighborhood, she put us on that bus, and for that, I am grateful. No sooner than we buried my mother, Another storm was brewing. I'm going to skip that part and go to the next part. I allowed my anger to harden my heart. I was so busy being mad at who she wasn't, I didn't get a chance to know who she was. One conversation, one "I'm sorry," one "yes ma'am" could have changed the whole trajectory of our relationship, and we were both too stubborn to say it. I believe that my wanting to break free, wanting to mend our relationship, and wanting to honor God's word started the process of softening my heart. But I was not completely healed. As I stated before, I didn't know what to do with the hurt. I did not know how to let it go. I felt justified in my anger. I thought I had more time. I hoped that God would change her. I hoped that she would miraculously know what she had done wrong and apologize. The anger festered and bitterness grew. When morning comes, the hurt that won't allow you to forgive will be the same hurt that fuels your guilt. The pain of what could have been laid heavy on my chest like a 3,000-pound weight. And though the pain tightens upon your chest with every tear and with every restless night spent tossing and turning, the thought of the weight being removed causes more anguish. Thoughts of "you don't deserve peace" play over and over in your head like a broken record that you refuse to get up and remove from the record player. When morning comes, the memories that fuel your anger will be the same memories that ignite your regret. What happened will be drowned out by the possibilities of what could have been. As the wasted time of yesterday ticks away at today, depression becomes a welcome companion in your bed of misery. Though you yearn for sleep, sleep too is haunted by the inability, yet desperation to say, "I'm sorry." When morning comes, the reality of never being able to see, touch, smell, talk to, or even argue with your loved ones comes in waves like the ocean. The lost interactions, the missed moments, and the drastic change in routine leaves you in a state of bewilderment for days, weeks, even months after. The smallest or simplest of things that you took for granted now flash in your mind like lights on an ambulance. When morning comes, as quickly as the blink of an eye, you must fight to remember that God does not make mistakes. Though we don't understand grief or loss, He is still in control. You must fight to remember that it is perfectly okay to grieve, to cry, and to even feel guilt and regret. Even Jesus wept, knowing that He would raise Lazarus from the dead. I believe He wept not because of personal sadness or grief, but because of the compassion and the empathy He had for His friends in pain. He wept because of the temporary hopelessness that loss brings. Even though we have hope standing before us, waiting to embrace us with open arms. God ordained a time for everything, even mourning. However, just as seasons change, mourning is not supposed to last forever. At some point, your tears should turn to laughter, your sorrow into joy, and your pain into power. At some point, your uncomfortable memories should be replaced with happy thoughts, celebrating the life you shared rather than the times you missed. Grief awakens the spirit man and sparks spiritual warfare because discomfort sends the flesh into darkness, a place where the spirit man refuses to dwell. Because the love you shared is so strong, the flesh actually feels guilty and justifies sitting in the dark. In the dark, you can replay those memories over and over. In the dark, you can celebrate the day of their death every year. In the dark, you can acknowledge them on every passing holiday. Remembering your loved one is not the issue. The refusal to let go and move on is the problem. Faith knows He has many more things in store, but they cannot come to pass if we are stuck on who and what we lost yesterday. Moving on means no longer allowing Moving on means no longer allowing the anniversary of their death or birthday to cause sorrow and pause in your life. Moving on means enjoying the moment and celebrating your success without acknowledging their absence. If the enemy can keep you speaking, "I wish so-and-so were here," it prevents God from blessing you. Why? Because they can't be there. And hoping for someone to take part in something when God has said no is going against His will and questioning His plan. God doesn't take people and things away from us to hurt us or for us to dwell on what we once had. And that is all that we have time for today. I hope you have enjoyed our time today. Again, I was reading from my 4th book entitled Finding Faith, and you just heard me read chapter 8. I want to hear from you, so please either leave me a comment or send me an email to pursuitofpurpose2019@gmail.com and tell me your thoughts about the show or any questions you may have. If you haven't picked up your copy of Finding Faith, be sure to visit my website at www.indianatuggle.com. Again, that's www.indianatuggle.com. In addition to purchasing my books, there you can check out my services and shop my t-shirts and mugs in the Indie Rights store. Please be sure to connect with me on social media. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Just type in my name and you can rest assured I am the only Indiana Tuggle. Till we meet again, be blessed and walk in victory, and always remember that there is purpose in your pain.